Today we are looking at a case from the very end of the 19th century, so sit back as we go to Canada. Cordelia Vieux was born on the 22nd of June 1865 in Ville de Saint-Scholastique, a village in Canada's Quebec province. She was the youngest child of Noël Vieux and Émile Char, and her parents made sure that she received some schooling. In the 1870s, Quebec was largely a Catholic province, with religion playing a central role in daily life. Education for girls was not compulsory and often depended on family circumstances and religious influence. Schools run by religious orders, such as the Ursulines and the Congregation de Notre-Dame, were the primary option for girls. These institutions focused on basic literacy, arithmetic and religious instruction, along with training in domestic skills, to prepare girls for traditional roles. Cordelia went to one such school that reflected the educational opportunities available to girls in her community. When she finished her education, her brothers and sisters were already adults. Her three sisters worked as teachers, a respectable profession for women in the 1880s, and one of her brothers had joined the priesthood. Being the youngest, Cordelia was often seen as a cherished member of the family, the one who was looked after and supported. However, in 1889, her life took a significant turn. She was courted by a man named Isidore Poirier, who was 10 years her senior. He was known for his strong work ethic and his honest and reliable nature, which for Cordelia's parents made him an acceptable suitor. The courtship was quite brief, and on the 4th of November 1889, Cordelia and Isidore were married at the church in Saint-Canut. It was a happy occasion, attended by family and friends. At first everything seemed fine between them. However, as time passed, and Cordelia remained childless, rumours began to circulate throughout the village. In a society where having children was considered an essential part of marriage, their situation became a subject of gossip, reflecting the social pressures and expectations of the time. They lived in a modest house that Isidore had carefully built by himself. It seemed that he was very happy to work and provide for his wife. Cordelia also contributed to the household income. She worked as a seamstress, using her needlework talents to support the couple financially. Together they maintained a humble yet respectable life in the small village. Isidore was deeply devoted to his faith, adhering to all the traditions of a devout Catholic, and both he and Cordelia were highly active members of the local church community. Cordelia in particular was admired for her musical abilities. She was known as a skilled organist and often played during church services. Her talent was a source of pride and made her a valued member of the congregation. It was at the church that Cordelia first met Samuel Parslow. He was from a good family, but was unmarried and worked as a handyman. Eventually, he started working closely with Cordelia's husband. He assisted him with carpentry projects and also helped with various chores around the Poirier household. There were some tasks Cordelia couldn't manage, so Samuel took them on, but this only increased the local gossip among those who believed that she was neglecting the traditional duties of a wife. Samuel's presence became increasingly familiar, especially as Isidore often had to travel for work when there were limited opportunities in the village. By 1895, he had taken a job in Fresno in California, leaving Cordelia behind in Saint-Canut. While he was away, a letter arrived from the parish priest, Father Pinot, urging him to return home. The priest wrote, "Dear Sir, immediately return to your wife, or tell her to follow you." Father Pinot carefully avoided making direct accusations, but hinted at serious marital troubles. The underlying message was unmistakable, and there were many rumours in the village regarding Cordelia and Samuel. However, Isidore did not seem to take these accusations seriously. He replied to the priest and simply wrote, "Sir, I think I know my wife better than you." As is often the case in close-knit communities, gossip spread quickly. Soon it seemed that everyone in the village was talking about Cordelia Poirier and Samuel Parslow, and how they appeared unusually happy in each other's company. Samuel, who had been born in 1863, was much closer in age to Cordelia than her husband, and with Isidore often away for weeks at a time, many people in the village now believed that Cordelia and Samuel had formed a relationship that crossed the boundaries of what was considered socially and morally acceptable. However, when Isidore did eventually return, things between him and his wife seemed to be normal, although the village gossip continued. Despite Isidore's long hours and dedication to his work, The couple struggled financially and had accumulated a significant amount of debt. The ongoing strain created tension in their relationship, which was further exacerbated by Isidore's growing reliance on alcohol. His drinking, the pressures of his work, and the couple's financial instability only served to widen the emotional gap between him and Cordelia. Of course, the rumours from gossipers insisted that Isidore's drinking was solely driven by his wife's alleged infidelities. On Sunday the 21st of November 1897, Isidore spent the day at home in Saint-Canut, resting after what had been a long week at work. He remained in the house, undisturbed, while his wife Cordelia followed her usual Sunday routine. She attended church, where she exchanged pleasantries with Samuel Parslow. After the congregation had dispersed, Cordelia and Samuel returned to the Poirier home. It was now mid-afternoon, but their visit was brief. Cordelia left soon after to the house of her parents, while Samuel headed off to tend to the needs of his elderly mother. Cordelia spent the night at her parents' house and returned to the village the following day. She went to her house, but the door was locked, so she made her way to the church, as she had been scheduled to play the organ for a wedding ceremony. She was in fact the only person in the parish willing to play the organ without payment, and her contribution to the church was greatly appreciated by both the congregation and the clergy. Her talent and generosity brought a sense of reverence and beauty to Sunday services, weddings, and special occasions, which had made her an integral part of the Catholic community. Despite her personal challenges, Cordelia was always committed to assisting with religious activities. After the service, she made her way back to her home. However, when she arrived, she found the door still locked and was unable to gain entry. This was very strange indeed, and Cordelia seemed to become a little uneasy. After a few moments, she sought help from her neighbour, a man named Noah Bouveret, who worked as a blacksmith. He managed to climb through the window and unlock the house from the inside. However, instead of entering herself, Cordelia asked him to search the rooms. She seemed hesitant, her eyes darting nervously, as if she dreaded what they might find. Mr. Bouveret looked around, but when he entered the bedroom, he was faced with a horrifying sight. Isidore's body laying motionless on the bed. His throat had been cut, and a butcher's knife lay beside him. The room bore the unmistakable signs of a struggle. Blood was on the walls and the floor, furniture was overturned, and there was evidence that Isidore had been drinking before meeting his tragic end, which suggested that alcohol may have played a role in the events leading to his tragic demise. The gruesome sight left Cordelia so overwhelmed that she was unable to provide a coherent explanation for what had happened. Her shock and distress rendered her nearly speechless. The police were contacted and soon arrived to examine the scene. They wondered if Isidore's injuries might have been self-inflicted. While the investigators were in the house, Cordelia, now a widow, was comforted by neighbours. She confided in them that her husband had been drinking heavily in recent days and hadn't been acting like himself. Struggling to make sense of what had happened, she shared her belief that he had tragically taken his own life. The reason for Isidore's death was widely accepted, and the following day the newspapers announced that he had died by his own hand. However, the investigators looked more closely, and inconsistencies in the evidence began to emerge. The sheer violence of the injuries, the presence of the butcher's knife positioned near the door, pointed towards foul play rather than self-harm. They also found a woman's shoe print pressed in the blood-stained floorboards. Although the investigators remained silent, they were convinced that Isidore had fallen victim to a deliberate and brutal act of murder. Mrs. Poirier, the mother of the deceased man, told officers how deeply shocked she was by the revelations surrounding her son's death. She lived with 2 daughters, both employed at a local boot and shoe factory, and had 3 other sons, who were all married. She described Isidore as a hard-working and sober man, known for his good character and lack of bad habits. She insisted that while he never voiced complaints about his wife, she suspected that the marriage had been an unhappy one. She revealed that she had not seen her daughter-in-law in over 4 years, believing that this estrangement was the result of Cordelia's unwillingness to maintain a connection with the family. Officers listened to her and thought that her statement added to a sense of mystery and tragedy that surrounded her son's untimely death. The post-mortem examination confirmed that Isidore Poirier had been brutally murdered, a revelation that caused both fear and outrage in the small, close-lit village of Saint-Canut. The community, unaccustomed to such violence, was left in shock as the tragic details emerged. However, their initial shock only increased when on the 25th of November, authorities arrested Cordelia Poirier and Samuel Parslow in connection with the crime. Both were taken to the police station to be interviewed, and both denied any wrongdoing and claimed that they had nothing to do with the death of Isidore Poirier. They maintained this pretense, but following much persuasion from Detective McCaskill, Cordelia changed her story and admitted to knowing that Samuel Parslow had planned to murder her husband, but claimed that she had not directly participated in this brutal act. In a calm and straightforward manner, she recounted her version of events. She explained that Samuel Parslow had been pressurizing her since January to kill her husband. She said that they had discussed the matter on multiple occasions. Then in mid-October, Samuel travelled to Montreal and purchased a revolver. But when he showed it to her, Cordelia said that she objected to its use, as she feared that the noise would attract attention. She then said that a week prior to the crime, Samuel had sharpened a butcher's knife and said that he was going to use that instead. Cordelia claimed that she advised him against killing her husband, warning him that it was inevitable that he would be caught. Despite her protests, she said that she felt certain that he was going to try to do it. On the afternoon of the crime, Cordelia said that she left her home and went to visit her father. While nothing specific was said between her and Samuel about the plan, she told officers that she had an unshakable conviction that her husband's life was about to end. The following morning, as she returned to the house and encountered Samuel, she told the detective that he looked at her, smiled, and said in French, "Je l'ai fait," meaning "I have done it." According to Cordelia, this was the first moment that she learned her husband had been killed. She went on to say that when she arrived at her home, she could not get inside, so instead headed to the church to play the organ for a wedding. While telling this to Detective McCaskill, she expressed frustration about her confinement, claiming that she did not understand why she was being detained, as unbeknown to her, these omissions painted a damning picture of her involvement. Later, Detective McCaskill persuaded her to retell the story in a session where other officers were present. However, this testimony revealed troubling inconsistencies and an unsettling indifference. When asked about what she considered an accomplice in a murder to be, she replied, "Someone who holds a man while another kills him." This response only highlighted the depth of her complicity and lack of remorse. Once Cordelia had confessed, Detective McCaskill managed to gain a confession from Samuel Parslow by telling him that Cordelia had blamed him entirely for the crime. However, Samuel's statement was quite different to the statement given by her. He claimed that Cordelia had not only participated in the murder, but had actively encouraged it. According to Samuel, the two of them entered the bedroom while Isidore lay asleep. He took a seat at the bed while Cordelia stood on the opposite side, and she whispered, "Kill him, kill him." Samuel described a chaotic scene. He said that he struck Isidore with the butcher's knife, which startled him, and he woke up. A fierce struggle followed, and in the commotion, Isidore tried to defend himself. At one point, he even grabbed the blade. Samuel went on to say that he stabbed him, and eventually Isidore succumbed to his injuries. When the officers asked what happened next, Samuel replied that he and Cordelia staged the scene to try and make it look like he had died from his own hand and placed the knife near the body. Detective McCaskill found Samuel Parslow's confession more credible, as it aligned more closely with the physical evidence found in the house and on the deceased man's body. The community of Saint-Canut was left horrified by the details of the crime and the cold-blooded actions of those involved. On the 27th of November, Isidore was buried. The service was attended by most of the village. Following the conclusion of the preliminary inquiry into the murder of Isidore Poirier, the magistrate formally committed Cordelia and Samuel to stand trial at the upcoming criminal court, which was set to begin on the 7th of January 1898. The case now became a highly anticipated trial, which was expected to draw significant public interest. It was decided that it would be presided over by Mr. Justice Taschereau. The trial officially began on the 17th of January, attracting widespread public interest. The courtroom was filled to capacity, with newspaper reporters eager to document every detail, and members of the public crowding into the gallery to witness the proceedings. On the first day, damning evidence began to surface. The court learned that in February 1894, Isidore had drafted a will naming his wife as his sole beneficiary. However, within months of this, rumours and gossip began to circulate about Cordelia's behaviour. She was frequently seen in the company of Samuel Parslow, and their friendship raised eyebrows throughout the small, tight-knit community. Despite repeated efforts by her father and the village priest to intervene and dissuade her from associating with Mr. Parslow, Cordelia defiantly continued to spend a lot of time with him. This only added fuel to the scandal, casting a shadow over her marriage and further alienating her from those who sought to guide her back to propriety. This evidence painted a picture of a woman whose actions not only betrayed her husband, but also defied the moral expectations of her community. The prosecution also informed the courts that Cordelia had persuaded her husband to take out a $2,000 life insurance policy on the 17th of January 1897. Following this, she wrote to the secretary of the insurance company in Montreal, asking if the policy would still pay out if her husband died under unusual circumstances, such as being murdered, poisoned, or disappeared with his remains later found. The secretary wrote back and confirmed that it would. In October, the policy premium was not paid, and the company sent her reminders on the 1st and 14th of November, informing her that the policy would lapse if payment was not made by the 24th. Cordelia ignored these notices and did not pay the premium. Nevertheless, when she discovered that her husband had been murdered on the 22nd of November, just 2 days before the policy was due to expire, she attempted to claim the $2,000. Many witnesses confirmed that they're aware of Cordelia's infidelity, and all said that they considered her husband to be a hard-working and decent man. On the 2nd of February 1898, Cordelia Poirier and Samuel Parslow were found guilty of the murder of Isidore Poirier. However, before they were sentenced, a significant legal dispute arose over the admissibility of the confessions, which were called into question due to the method used to extract them. Ultimately, the court ruled that these confessions could not be used as evidence, which meant that there would be new trials for both defendants. Cordelia's retrial began on the 5th of December 1898 and lasted 11 days. Despite the legal wrangling and renewed scrutiny, the outcome remained unchanged. She was found guilty of murder and sentenced to hang. Samuel's trial commenced shortly thereafter, on the 19th of December, and attracted a large and boisterous crowd. The courtroom was packed with spectators, who shouted and jostled for space, and created so much chaos that several women were injured in the commotion. His trial lasted until the 29th of December, and despite considerable public sympathy, the jury returned a unanimous guilty verdict. Following the two trials, a petition was raised requesting clemency for Samuel Parslow, as it seemed that the jury and the public had mixed feelings about his culpability. Despite this, the judge delivered a grave and unwavering sentence. He described Mr. Parslow as a man who had fallen under the influence of a bad woman, who he assisted in murdering her husband. He, too, was sentenced to death. Both Cordelia and Samuel appealed the verdicts, but these appeals were denied. At 8 a.m. on Friday the 10th of March 1899, Cordelia Poirier and Samuel Parslow were hanged at the jail at Saint-Canut. They were later both buried at a cemetery in Saint-Canut. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for listening. As usual, please leave any comments or feedback you may have, and I hope to see you all again in the next brief case